Afternoon this morning from where we're watching, but hold on, sir. We did an icebreaker because the
Excellency, our leader, Mr. Peter Obi, you're welcome, sir. Excellency, Ambassador, distinguished senators, our chair, the great chair, Senator Nnamdi Kanu, you're welcome. My leader, the coordinator of the Obedient Movement, my comrade, I think several distinguished. So let me say, honorable members, senators, everybody, the rep of His Excellency the Governor, my friend Chinas, I welcome. All protocols observed at this point. I'll be very brief. So I have two basic statements to make. And the first statement is that Nigeria's survival depends and derives from a successful revolution defined by two basic ideas. The first is the idea of democratic citizenship, and the second is the idea of democratic developmentalism. The second statement I will make in this speech is that Mr. Peter Obi possesses the best profile, pedigree, personality, and passion to lead this desirable and desired revolution. Now, let me start these two theses. I start with the problem. What is the problem with Nigeria? Oftentimes, we start solving problems without first understanding those problems. Both in politics, in economy, in every aspect of human endeavor. One of the biggest tragedies is to commence with earnest intensity to solve either a non-existing problem or a poorly understood problem. This is not theoretical. One of the leading reformers after the collapse of USSR, Geoffrey Sachs, did a great job with social economies in East Europe and others. And finally, he adopted a shock therapy. We have to be bold, solve the problem, reform everywhere. Finally, in his book, The End of Poverty, he came to a conclusion that the failure of those efforts, because unlike doctors, that economists did not borrow from clinical medicine, where you proceed from differential diagnosis. You try to, if somebody comes, a child has fever, they don't look at one symptom and say, this is a fever, give him aspirin. They do differential diagnosis. They also map that sickness within the morbidity of the family. And so I would like to try to diagnose properly the Nigerian problem. So I start by saying that two statements. One, that Nigeria is failing. Nobody doubts that. Two, Nigeria is contradicted. So the failure is reinforced by the contradiction. Now, what are if we did any evidence of Nigerian failure? I think in 1964, thereabout, a leading developmental economist, Dudley Sear, gave us a framework, and Mr. Peter Obi has been very clear in his statements on that framework. He says, how do we assess whether a country is economically developing? He says there are only three indicators. First, what is happening to poverty? Second, what's happening to unemployment? Third, what's happening to inequality? Then if you like, you can look at what's happening to gross GDP per capita. But these three are the most important thing. So if you look at, without wasting time, clearly, Nigeria is failing and failing woefully. By 2019, we are described as the largest poverty nation. The World Poverty Clock showed that we are the largest collection of poor people. But beyond that, if you look at the world poverty clock, you see something. Every minute, second, people are living or running into poverty. So it's like they have a figure. You see people running out of poverty, showing how many people are escaping from poverty in those countries. They see people running into poverty. Interestingly, Ethiopia and Nigeria were very poor. But Ethiopia has more people running away from poverty. Nigeria had more people running into poverty. So it's not that we are poor. We are getting poorer in almost geometrical proportion. So, for example, by the official NBS statistics, by 2019 and 2020, the poor, very poor people in Nigeria were about 45%, 42, 45. Today, it's about 56% and growing. It's expected that this year alone, about 20 million, up to 20 million people will get into poverty. Now, if you look at the non-income measure, look at deprivation, vulnerability, access to basic needs. At least in 2019, about 154 million people don't have the barest facility for the barest existence. Now, it's not just that Nigeria is poor. Nigerians are getting poorer. It's that the prospect of Nigerians being less poor diminishes every day. If you look at our debt to GDP, may look comfortable, but look at our debt to revenue and debt servicing. How much we are using. This government claims to have driven it down from 70-something% to about 60-something%. But if you're using 60-something% of your earning, and your earning is diminishing, and your population is growing to service just debt. So if you add the new wave of debts that we're going to incur, we might get back to 99% debt servicing. So what's the point? The point is that we're not just poor. We are increasingly not having resources to even escape poverty. Now, if you look at unemployment, the federal government changed the methodology and got us to about 4.something%. But everybody knows that the definition of poverty today is that if you are working for 2 hours, if you're a cab driver, Uber driver, 2 hours, you are working, which is laughable. Now, the point is that unemployment is a big problem. Now, look at inequality. Gini coefficient inequality were very high. But the key point I want to leave us today is a data that shows that even by 1999 to 1994, from that time, Nigeria and Taiwan, Nigeria was generating about 8,500 megawatts, 3,500 megawatts daily. Taiwan was doing about 1,500 megawatts. Today, they're doing 30-something thousand, and we are still at 4,000. If we are generous, sometimes 3,500. Now, this is a story around stagnation and decline. Now, if you look at macroeconomic factors, they are more terrible. If you look at fragility index globally, which means that Nigeria is not just poor, Nigeria is very fragile. Nigeria is one of the most fragile nations in the world. Today, if you look at innovation, I looked at the latest 2024 Innovation Index by the World WIPO, World Intellectual Property Organization. Togo, Niger, all West African countries are scoring higher than Nigeria in both innovation and infrastructure index. So this is a case of real failure. Now, failure is not a problem too much. What's a problem? It's actually that your design does not enable you escape failure. So Nigeria has a bigger problem, which I call the fact that Nigeria is contradicted. There is a contradiction in the Nigerian system. Now, I just want to mention quickly before I get to what this means for revolution. Nigeria has a nationality problem. The key challenge for Nigeria has been, how do we describe a Nigerian? How do we describe ourselves as a nation state? The history of economic and social development in the world tells us that it starts with a national economy. A nation, it must be a nation. And a nation is defined not by basically geography. It's a narrative, it's a construct around oneness, common identity, law and social norms. So we have a crisis of nationality. We have a crisis of state and religion. This is critical. And these crises are foundational. These are crises that we have refused to transcend because of leadership failure. So today, we are gathered here on the Obedient Family as one people, one Nigerian nation. But outside here, our government continues to see us more as ethnic and religious differences. People are different. That's a crisis that we have to deal with. The third crisis is a value crisis. Value does not come from heaven. Value is a formation around social relationships. So today, people argue, and I say so, that about 60% of certificates in Nigerian public sector are forged. Nigeria has an epidemic of forgery. And that epidemic of forgery is a leadership crisis. And forgery, a nation of forgery, a nation that has promoted forgery, is not just about the fact that criminals are getting access to resources. It's about the fact that they are corrupting the software for development. Software for development is ethical, it's moral, it's about value. And that's why you can't talk about any country that has any real transformation without a real orientation of value. Leadership is where value flows leadership, because value is about what we affirm and signal, and people act in like manner. So if you look at from 1999, when people who were either former criminals, I remember when I was special advisor to Senate President, a senator said that he looked and saw people he put in jail sitting in the hallowed chambers. That is the epitome of a national value crisis. And that value crisis translates to the fourth problem, which is a productivity crisis. Without value, you can't be productive. I pity our leader, Peter Obi, who has been crying about productivity, urging us to do. We can't be productive until we restore back value. And that value is a sense in which people know that they're getting what they deserve. Today, it's difficult to tell students, the universities. If my daughter was going to go to NYSC, he said, Daddy, it's okay. He said, no, Daddy, it's about who you know. Talk to somebody. Today, it's always about talk to. So why would there be a pursuit of excellence if work, reward, has no bearing to work? Look at the last JAMB crisis and compare with the INEC problem. And I tell people, INEC problem is not just a problem of systems or a problem of institutions. They're important. It is a collapse of value, because the underlying electoral reform is professionalism and value. So our leadership has debased professionalism and value and norms because they have not been able to, the reward for leadership has no bearing with value and integrity. And so that constitutes the fourth crisis. And the question then is, why is this problem of nationality crisis, religious crisis, the problem of value and productivity crisis, why is it not being solved? That is why this revolution is important. Let me give you reasons why it's not being solved. One, Nigerian politics is, the Nigerian nation is trapped in a political incubus. You can't move forward. Why? Because the politics itself reinforces the pathology. Our politics reinforces the pathology. And this politics has a historical legacy, starting from the ethnic competition of the First Republic, coming to the military debasement of value, and today's new politics, which is founded not on any commitment to national development, but committed to two things: ethnic and religious outbidding, competition among ethnics, and secondly, individual outbidding. Very important to bear that in mind. Second, I talk about inherited political culture. The other thing that has made this revolution impossible or has trapped it is that there's absence of a national elite. There's an absence of a national ideology of transformation. Nigeria has had moments to transform, but politics has headed back. And that's why the challenge for Nigeria is twofold, two ways. either a ballot box revolution or an anarchical sort of violence-based revolution that nobody can define the direction. There's a guy who talks about revolution. Now, the irony is that revolution has not always historically been positive. The only bankable revolution for Nigeria is a ballot box revolution for two reasons. Because it has legitimacy and fits into the new geopolitics. The revolution of red beret or green beret outside mobilizing Nigerians towards electoral victory is both an illusion and a dangerous revolution. The real revolution is what obedience are talking about, ballot box. So our politics has been... So Nigeria has not been able to transform this endemic crisis because of low energy politics, low energy, elitist politics, structure, co-opt political leaders, take governors, honorable members, they sign agreement, give them return ticket, low energy politics. We need a high energy politics that focuses on the people, that goes to the grassroots, that mobilizes people, that is strong on messaging, that is revolutionary in that is driven by a passion for change and transformation. We've not had that. We had some snippets of that in the Second Republic with parties like PRP, parties that were grounded with the people, parties that were focused on mobilizing people to challenge the system. So the question then is, what is the solution? And I'm coming to the second point about why I think Mr. Peter Obi is the person who can lead this revolution. Now, what's the problem? The solution is simple. We have to do a new politics that has three characteristics I put here. This politics must reject a rejection of false mythologies about Nigerian politics. The false mythologies is that Nigerian politics must go through a particular path dependence. It must be ethnic, it must be religious, it must hover around some so-called big names. That is not true. Today, the confluence of new technology, of the rise of narratives, and the poverty that's prevalent means that all of us here today can overthrow the political order and create a new one. You don't need to be anchored to any powerful name. We have to reject the mythologies that change is not possible. The mythology that if you don't have billionaires, it can't win election. The mythology that INEC, though it is a bankrupt, flawed electoral commission, cannot be changed. It can be changed. The mythology that judges can safely continue to give judgments that are essentially political stimulus to electoral fraud, that's a mythology. Judges themselves can be converted into a new jurisprudence that recognizes and authenticates the people's will. We have to depart from these mythologies. We have to reject them. We have to reject also the idea of ethno-religious outbidding and competition. Nigerians have a common destiny to perish or prosper. We have a common destiny to be a poor people or to be prosperous. Our diverse identities are not themselves hindrance to transcending and mobilizing a common movement. Our leaders, those who have put us in this tragedy, have foolishly and criminally emphasized ethnic religious difference. Nigeria is a contiguous zone that poverty can radiate across board and wealth can radiate across. There should be no geopolitical resistance to creating a Nigerian movement that answers to every Nigerian. That's what obedient movement will reject. And finally, the movement must develop a developmental consensus centered around the two concepts I've spoken about. And now let me say a bit about why I think we have found an ideology for revolution. the notion of a democratic citizenship is that governance is centered around the citizen. When I was advisor to Foreign Affairs Minister Chief Oko-Jumbo, and we are thinking around what concepts can we use to ignite a new consciousness, we said, let's talk about citizen diplomacy. The Nigerian diplomacy should be focused on the well-being of its citizens. Now, all of us know Chapter 2 of the Constitution. Unfortunately, that chapter has been neglected by political parties, which is a source of the ideology of change in Nigeria. Democratic citizenship has 3 dimensions. The first is political, equality, justice for all. But the most important one is economic. And it simply talks about the practical implementation of economic policy must be to do 3 things. 1, economic growth. Growth is critical. Growth is where our politics should focus about. 2, it must be about the welfare of the citizens and well-being. We must create inclusive society. 3 is that all our leaders must be obsessed. Every Nigerian leader must be obsessed about Nigeria's economic growth. It's very important. Today, part of what's driving both political and insecurity is that we are not producing wealth at a level that we can share equitably to ourselves. That's very important. So the obedient movement must signal economic growth as important. Now, what does it mean to talk about the issue of democratic developmental state? This is very important. I have studied economic growth. I have not seen a country, no matter their potential, that grew without a leadership that is almost mad about development. You can't create economic transformation through a government that does not see everything about how does these actions, investments, drive growth, improve well-being. You see, Nigeria, in 1960, if you look at the Time magazine of the American Time magazine, the cover story was Nigeria, 1960. It says this is a country with promise for Africa. Nigeria has failed that promise continually because the Nigerian political elites didn't want to become what Singapore became under Lee Kuan Yew, or what Korea became under General Park, or what China became under Deng. What did they become? These leaders clearly said that our focus is the development of our country. Not everything was done to make sure the country developed. And what does that mean? You cannot be talking, for example, today about spending billions on a coastal road project. I mean, I have people on Twitter who have read no economic textbook, arguing as if elephant projects are not development. Development must be connected directly to outcomes that expand capacity for production or improve human capital for production. If you do projects that are scattered and not connected and not tied to directly to this project, they're not developmental projects. So the problem is that we have to become a people a leadership that is agonizing day and night. How do we grow our economy? Again, let's not forget, in 1960, it was better. We're living today in a much more difficult global politics era. That nations are now going to compete against themselves. Nations now need their smartest and their most committed leaders who can get forth and resolve this crisis. Nigeria can no longer continue with the old style of Emiloko, old style of prerogatives, old style of let's come and share the loot, old style of how much can we use to buy this person. You need leaders who are going to go there, understand how the economy is working, and bring people together and create wealth. Now, why do I think Mr. Peter Obi is the right person to lead at this moment? You know, there's something I've learned earlier. Every leader you see, look at their profile. I have a theory I call the biographical theory of leadership. People don't lead beyond their experience and who they are. Many of us will say, oh, that man, I used to respect him. I didn't know. No. There's a verse in the Bible that says, lay no hand on man suddenly. You should always ask, where is this person coming from? Because leadership is not strange from your personality. Leadership is who we are. Leadership is paying attention. Leadership is the passion, what drives you. Now, let's look at those who have got it right in the past. Let's take 3 examples. The man who put China on the right path, Deng, was a member of the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party. He was sent to Russia, Paris, and he, instead of going to the classes for ideologues, he went to the factories, thinking about how did the West create wealth. When he came back to China, Chairman Mao, even he was imprisoned for some of his views. He didn't go extreme, but what he did was take the party and said that we must change this. What do you do? The first thing he says, wealth is good. Second thing he says, pursue truth through facts. Third, he says, it doesn't matter whether the cat is black or white as long as it catches mouse. This man was pragmatist. He understood how to take the party and turn it around. He's a member of the old order, but his passion, his commitment is about how do we make China become great. Let's take Lee Kuan Yew, who went to Oxford. Now, these people, some of them are educated. Deng didn't go to Oxford, but they share one thing in common. They have the pedigree of commitment to the well-being of their people. They have the personality of being decisive, being quiet but clear-minded, being soft but firm. They're not swashbuckling warmongers. They're not cracking heads and breaking bottles, but they are decisive, clear-minded where they are going. Take General Park, the same thing. Some are dictators, some are Democrats. What qualifies Mr. Peter Obi to lead this revolution? And that's the point I said, that first, profile. Who he is, what he has done before. I watched the AIT interview, and I was just laughing. People forget that not just infrastructure, security, Anambra was the best, the safest state in Nigeria then. Was the safest. In fact, some of the technologies used for crime prevention were being borrowed by police in Imo State elsewhere. Nigeria doesn't need a leader who will break bones. Nigeria needs a leader who will stimulate a new behavior through the subtleties of intelligence and persuasion. The reason why Nigerian leaders have not escaped from the power dependence of contradiction is because there's a web that ties them in. The leader who can move Nigeria must be a leader who is prepared to cut off all ties. A leader who is positively selfish, that focus on the outcome and forget every embeddedness. We can't save Nigeria if we're embedded in the corrupt neo-patrimonial system. We are embedded in rewarding all our friends, all our families. We are embedded in rewarding all our villages. You can't, because Nigeria is almost verging to a criminal state now. So the leader for this revolution must be a man who can step away from this cobweb of corruption and incompetence and fiercely move us to the right direction. We don't want a person we love, a person who shares. We're looking for a philanthropist. None of these leaders move their country from this trajectory of failure to success. We are philanthropists. They had 2 things going for them. They were passionate for what they want to do, and they were prepared to even suffer themselves to get it done. The fierceness of sacrifice underlines all this. I want to stake my intellectual sincerity on the stake that so far, of all people who want to lead Nigeria today as president, I've not seen a man whose discipline, whose willingness to sacrifice, whose single-mindedness, whose commitment to the basic welfare of ordinary people trumps that of Mr. Peter Obi. I am a critic, not a flatterer. I am a critic, so I have a right to, I can criticize everybody. But I can tell you that the reason why Peter Obi fits this moment is that this moment calls for disruption. This moment calls for somebody to extricate us from a deadening and self-reinforcing cobweb of corruption. You can't get it out the normal way. We cannot get to development through the same patrimony that has characterized our politics. We need a new politics, and the obedient movement is that vanguard for that new politics. I would like to end on this note. The great American sociologist, Margaret Mead, says, do not neglect what a few people can do. He said, in history, what matters is what few people can do. It was few people, 3 people in Oxford who dreamt about making Singapore great. Lee Kuan Yew and his colleagues, and they came back and diligently plotted the path to what is today Singapore. We are very flamboyant people, able to carry the book from thought to... In fact, the time Obasanjo ordered all cabinet members to have the book, we like to show off, but probably will not read it, will not meditate, will not think about it, will not practice what we read. We claim too much. And I want to arouse us that this country is not anywhere near great. This country is almost miserable. This country is worse off than our West African neighbor. I went to Sierra Leone to teach their security officials for 2 weeks, and I saw teachability. They were willing to learn. Here, nobody listens, nobody learns. We are in a dangerous spot, but everything in life is created apart from God. Everything is created: poverty, hope, failure, success. These young men and women who were only 4 in the room, who were derided, who were scorned, who were abused, who were blackmailed, but they won officially 6 million votes, 12 states, plus 5 or 6 suppressed states. These young people can actually change Nigeria. These young people can remake Nigeria. These young people can disrupt this pathology of lies. These young people can march Nigeria into the new era. These young people can reverse the failure of decades. You can make it. It is possible. Thank you.